Alright guys, such come back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Dashy has commented on one of the big questions going into the new season, how exactly OpTic's SMG lineup is going to be working, given the fact that both Pred and Shotzzy did pretty much the same thing for their two respective teams over the last couple of seasons. Dashy reckons the entry sub role doesn't really exist anymore, but could some sort of arrangement in Search and Destroy help these guys compared to what the other teams are going to be doing up and down the field? Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. Firstly, on the CDL schedule, to my understanding, they've pretty much locked in now what it is going to be, when it's going to start, when the tournaments are going to be. I don't really know where it's going to be, at least of the tournaments. There's rumours that certainly Boston are going to have one again. Toronto, I think, will have one again. Obviously, like, OpTic are going to have one at some point in Texas, right? And then, you know, the rest of them, maybe Miami. The rest of it, I'm not really sure at the moment. But, yeah, I think the schedule is potentially coming soon. I don't exactly know if Jake Hell is going to leak it ahead of time or whether he's just going to wait for the CDL to announce it himself. But yeah, usually it's around about this time we know, because let's be honest here, the game comes out in a couple of weeks, and as soon as the game comes out, the season is obviously going to start at some point. Ranked play will probably take quite some time to arrive, unfortunately, but hopefully the CDL can start as it did last year in December. That would be the ideal scenario. If we have to wait until January again, it's going to be massively frustrating. Hopefully there's some sort of action before Christmas at the very least, because otherwise it's just a straight up big step back from what we had last season, to be honest. So we'll see, because it usually is around about now, and also it's gonna have to put some pressure, you would think, on some of these teams to actually confirm a team, because I mean, look, we think we know kind of what Vegas are doing and what Carolina are doing. We still don't know what Gorillas are doing, but when the CDL say, hey, this is the schedule, this is where we're going and when, and it's also pretty important to get that confirmed so teams and players and certainly fans can actually figure out, all right, what events am I going to try and go to and when? Because if it doesn't get announced until last minute, it becomes far more challenging. Like, let's say there's an event in January. If you announce it in November, December, it becomes far more difficult to actually, you know, make that work for the fans. So they really need to confirm this soon for all parties involved, and also to try and tell Gorillas, if that is the team that is, you know, biding their time, shall we say, to be like, look guys, we've got matches here, like, you've got to get ready to go at some point. We're only going to be a couple of months away from matches, hopefully, and of course when the game launches, you want to get on that straight away, right? I mean, the first couple of days, there will be tournaments that are played, Search and Destroy tournaments, Respawn tournaments, whatever, but shortly after that, no doubt at all, they're going to go into scrims. I mean, usually it's like 3 or 4 days after the game launches, the teams start scrimming because it's fun. Like, obviously it's enjoyable to play in that setting, find out the new maps and everything, but you need a team in order to do that. So that's where there are some questions still here. I also saw there's some Claire as well, that he's about to be hitting the gym, and in shape exercising me is going to be a force on the server this year. So after all the, you know, questions about Claire for the last few days, pretty much still confirming that, yeah, he's going to be on a team. It's probably going to be Carolina, to our understanding. What the rest of the team is, we still don't really know. The rumours, you know, that Zuma talked about on stream were that the rumours we'd heard about Fame and Nero weren't true, but as of yet, haven't heard massive updates on that one. Now, let's talk about this SMG situation, because always a controversy about this. What is the best way to set up your SMG line? And especially when you're forming a new SMG line, how's that going to behave? Generally, there is a very high correlation between the best teams and the best SMG duos, but in part, that is SMG duos that work well together. For example, Shotzzy and Hook, despite on paper you might think, right, how's that really going to work? Shotzzy is very aggressive, so is Hook at times. Who's going to do the slaying there? You might think, all right, it doesn't really make much sense, but actually those two have a really good record together, and they play off each other very well. Now, could they upgrade from Hook? Yes, and they did, but still, Shotzzy and Hook is a good SMG duo, and it's worked well before, and maybe it will work well again at some point. Maybe that's, you know, we'll see down the line whether things change. Simp and aBeZy, though, have kind of been the gold standard for the last few years, and I thought these numbers here from Doug Levy were pretty interesting, looking into the, well, when Simp is alive and kind of in and around the hardpoint and stuff, the team KD is higher than pretty much everybody else. So when Simp was alive, FaZe got 7.5 extra kills per 10 minutes. When he wasn't, they only got plus 2.1 extra kills compared to, I guess, what the average would be. Now, of course, when you've got another player alive, there's always going to be a boost, right? If you've got 4 players attacking a point rather than 3, obviously you're going to get more kills in that scenario, but it's kind of like how many more kills do you get is determined in part by who that player is in that position. So I'm not really sure how much this stat means, to be honest, but it is kind of interesting that one of the highest correlations here is for Simp, who was, well, let's be honest, doing a lot of dirty work for that FaZe team last year because he kind of needed to with the way the AR line was set up. And this is where the question comes to the OpTic team, right? Especially given they're putting into play this Priestahh and Shotzzy thing. Now, I mean, this clip as well here from Shotzzy kind of sums up in some sense what we're going to be talking about. Hopefully snaking doesn't exist to quite this level in this game, but, you know, nothing much Shotzzy could do in this particular scenario playing ranked over the last couple of days. But on paper, you might think, all right, Shotzzy, the hyper-aggressive guy, he should be the entry man, and then Pred can be the scump or the HyDra and can effectively just slay out pretty hard. That's probably how I would set things up. But the reality is that especially in the respawn modes, that's not really how the teams are designed. It was figured out several years ago now that you can't just have an OBJ SMG, a slaying SMG, a flex position player, and then an anchor. Like back in the day, like, let's say Black Ops 2, if you guys watching any of the gameplay back then, the anchor player would literally just sit at the back of the map holding spawns. That was their job. And that was very viable, and especially given the way the spawns worked in those games and the map design and the fact that it played slower, that was fine. But in the modern day, it became realized, especially in the jetpack era, you have to flood in. You can't just wait around for your entry guy to come along and bail you out. You've got to all go one after another. And then even after jetpacks ended, that was still realized to be the way to do it, even on boots on the ground, especially with the movement as it is in these games today. So Dashy says, look, everyone talking about entry subs doesn't really know what they're talking about, and you know, we'll all be doing it when necessary.
I'm listening to Drake.
Who's going to be the entry SMG and or AG? There's no entry, bro. There's no such thing as wait. Our entry. We gotta wait for our entry sub to hit this hill, guys. Could be anyone, bro. Could be me, bro. Rarely it's me, but like,
Good luck at the
depends on the scenario. That doesn't work. Doesn't work like that. There's no entry. Like, just people like have that title because they just do it a lot more than others. Like their playstyle just supports it. Doesn't mean they always have to do it. Yeah, yo, no one move. We gotta wait for birthday so we can enter the hill. Oh, guys, we can't kill this last guy in hill because our entry sub is not here to hit the hill. Everyone, wait. Yo, how long do you need? Okay, we can hit the hill in 5 seconds then.
That game actually had like.
We can't move. Our entry's not here. Wait for the entry.
So I do think most teams have Dashy's perspective, especially in the respawn modes. Okay, there's always going to be a little bit. Let's say you watch Cellium. The amount of times you watch Cellium and one of his teammates does just run past him, like, that's just how they set it up. And Cellium is almost never going to be the guy that just dives around the corner. Now, sometimes it's necessary. I think even there was a moment, wasn't there, this year with Cellium, were they playing Boston or maybe they're playing OpTic or something, and it was on Hotel. It was on that, like, hard point on the top of the garage or whatever, and Cellium was a bit weak. If he'd just flown around the corner and baited out some bullets, I think Slasher gets his trade, but he waits for Slasher to go first, he dies, and then Cellium dies, and there's situations like that where, you know, you've got to be willing to go first, especially if you're, you know, you're one shot, you'll know where you're going to survive this. You've got to be baiting in your team. But the fact that Cellium never does that for FaZe, because aBeZy always does that for FaZe, has, I think, caused them problems at times over the last couple of years. But for most teams, it's kind of known in the respawns that, yeah, there's no real entry sub. Okay, sure, you've got players that make certain routes and stuff, but in Search and Destroy, that's where things get more interesting to me. Like, I have no issues with, you know, how Priestahh and Shotzzy are going to operate in the respawns. I feel like there should be no issues there at all. It's the Search and Destroy that's probably more crucial, especially who's getting the first bloods, who's going to take those routes, because that's what Shotzy's done the last couple of years. He takes some crazy routes, right, to try and make it work, especially in Search, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but he's the man to open up the round, get the first blood. That has been Pred for Seattle the last couple of years, and this is one of the big SMG duos forming, right, of the other top teams. Okay, you've got Envoy coming alongside CleanX, of course. Interesting to see how that one plays out, but, you know, CleanX tends to make all of his teammates look better around him. I think Envoy should be good in that role. That's an interesting one. But aBeZy and Simp and HyDra and Kismet, they're staying the same. We know what they can do. We know what those respective duos are capable of. We don't really know what Priestahh and Shotzzy are going to be doing. And this is where I'm looking at this number specifically. The first blood number. I mean, look, aBeZy last year had 137 first bloods. But look at the first blood rate. I mean, 137 and 118. Like, so many engagements. Compared to Simp, 98 and 73. Which is significantly lower. It's not, it's not nothing. Obviously, you are going to get some first bloods. But aBeZy's pace, like, he's clearly the entry man. Like, there's no other way to put it. In Search and Destroy, aBeZy's always been the entry man for a very long time. It was especially notable in Cold War, on maps like Moscow, Search and Destroy. aBeZy would almost always get first blood for FaZe, or he would die first. And if that was the case, they'd probably lose the round. But that was the way that aBeZy would play it, and there was really nobody else that could even try and match that. You see a similar thing, really, for New York Subliners. And this is interesting because HyDra plays, in many ways, very similarly to Pred. Because you might compare HyDra and Pred to the likes of Scump back in the day, and I think that's honestly not a bad comparison. But I think most people would look at Scump and think, well, he's kind of more of a Simp-esque player, right? He's more of like a Slayer guy, slightly slower. And if you were to form a team with Scump as an SMG, you'd want to form that team with, you know, Shotzzy, as has been the case recently, or with aBeZy, or some sort of entry sub, and that's the theory. However, Scump kind of, especially back in the day, would be the do-it-all, right? He would be the aggro guy as well, and that's kind of how it's worked, I think, with HyDra. If you look at the Search and Destroy, 114 first bloods to 97. Kismet actually has less than that, 106 and 110. Now, still, he's slightly negative, lots of engagements, and they shared that load very much so, right? I mean, Kismet and HyDra, if you add up their first blood rates, very, very similar across the two of them. So this is where you've got to wonder about the situation in OpTic. Is it fine to do, you know, does it matter? Do you need an entry guy in Search and Destroy either? Or can what they're going to do in Respawn, which probably every team agrees is the way to go, is that actually a good option? Very possibly. I mean, 110 and 73 for Pred, similar numbers in a way to what HyDra had, really. And then Shotzzy's numbers were like this, 123 and 116, to even more so. But, you know, that was, he was doing for OpTic what Pred was basically doing for Surge, and both were successful in doing so. We know that Search and Destroy is going to be a massively important game mode, especially this year. We also don't really know how similar the third mode is going to be to, you know, what's the third mode going to be? We could talk about Capture the Flag, we could talk about Control, but also there's discussions about OBJ work and who's going to be doing that. And okay, everyone's kind of known in Capture the Flag history that you don't just, there's not just one guy that caps at the back of the map. Okay, sometimes there is, but usually you have to try and make the rotations and anyone can pick up the flag and run with it. Although, you know, back in the day it did used to be the OBJ SMG or whatever you'd want to call it at the time. So yeah, how do you guys perceive this going? I think Dashy, you know, the clip was pretty funny, right? I get what he's saying, definitely in the respawn modes, but in Search and Destroy, you generally do have to make a decision on how you set up your structure as to who's going to try and find those gaps, especially on offense or something. Like, who's going to find the gaps in the defense to try and make the round win happen. Both Shotzzy and Pred can do that very well, and maybe you let them both do that, but there's only so many ways to go on the map, or you just let them run loose together and both find those engagements, which is also a valuable idea. And you've got to think there's some correlation here between, well, these guys and the success they have and who goes down as being the best SMG player. Breaking Point here kind of put together this one with, you know, Pred, Shotzzy, aBeZy, HyDra. Obviously, there's plenty of other names you could put in the discussion as well. TJ throws Capsidal into the mix. So very much interested to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.